Hello, hello. Hi, kids. Hi, parents. We are back and we are talking about industrial farms and ranches and fisheries. And I want to give you just a little glimpse into these types of operations because this is where a lot of our food comes from that we buy from the stores. So I want you to have a really good idea of the whole spectrum going back to the beginning, which we have gone over in the previous lessons. And in this section, I want you to remember that food comes from the wild, from nature. It comes from farming in your own backyard or small scale or medium sized scale local farming and ranching. And it comes from large scale ranching and farming, like you see here. So you saw this slide in the last lesson, and we went over what all these different things are and what some of these industrial operations can look like. In this one, I wanted to go over a topic that is a pretty popular topic, and that is farmed versus wild caught fish. So it can be a little bit confusing at the supermarket when you see wild caught or fresh caught, and there's pros and cons to each one. But here, like everywhere in Sizzle Kids, I just want you to have information. I want you to have as much knowledge as you can about this particular topic so that when you are at the store, you can decide what kind of fish you want to spend your money on and what kind of fish you want to eat. So, I wanted to show you these pictures of some farming operations because they are so interesting to see. And this is not stuff we get to see every day. Um, we have these rings, these buoy rings. Underneath these buoy rings, there's big nets, and the fish live there. So these are natural bodies of water where the fish are enclosed in large nets, and that's how they're raised and how they're bred. Uh, I thought this was such an interesting picture, this overhead picture of this salmon farm, because you can see the pink parts of the salmon. Those are the actual fish in there. And you can see how dense it can be and how many fish that they can farm in these kinds of large scale fisheries. Again, I showed you in the last lesson, but here it is again. Bins, there's warehouses filled with water, with bins with water in them, and fish are bred in these bins. And here's another picture of some aqua farming. That's what this is called when fish are farmed. It's called aqua farming. Aqua is the Latin word for water. And so aqua farming is farming on water. And so that's what it means when you have a farmed fish, is in one of these types of situations where it's either in a warehouse in bins, it's in a natural body of water with nets. Um, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about farmed fish. This is not the same kind of natural, fresh, and free farm we're talking about in our local farms sections. So this is a large scale industrial fishery. This is farmed fish. Now there's a lot of differences between farmed fish and wild caught fish, as you can see here. This middle picture was actually a picture that I took personally, and this was at Trader Joe's. And this was a wild caught Alaskan sockeye salmon, a salmon, and then a fresh Atlantic salmon. So they both sound, you have to be very careful with labeling in the stores because they both sound great, right? The top one is wild caught. The bottom one, it doesn't say, except for at the very, very bottom in small print, that it's farmed. It just says fresh Atlantic salmon, which kind of sounds like it was in the Atlantic Ocean, and it very well could have been in an operation such as this on the left-hand corner where it's in the ocean, but it is still being farmed with nets. And so when we're talking about wild caught, it's freely living in the wild until it is caught. And when we're talking about something like this bottom picture, a fresh Atlantic salmon, it sounds really great, but it's actually a farmed fish. And I'm not saying that farmed fish are bad because there are a lot of upsides to farmed fish. We can fish a lot more. It helps the environment sometimes by not overfishing certain areas and still providing a big supply of fish. But there are differences in the food, in the meat that you get. And whatever you choose to buy, I just want you to know what those differences are. This is all about knowledge. All of Sizzle Kids is about empowering you with knowledge about your food. So for farmed, if you look at these other pictures, you're going to see differences in the meats. The wild salmon is a lot more dense. It's a lot more red. The farmed salmon has a lot more fat in it. The white Marbling through it is fat, and it's a lot lighter color. So, what that means is that the farmed fish, they have less areas to run around in. If you read the lesson that goes with this, I kind of talk about the same thing as like if you were running around in a playground or if you're allowed to run around in a big free field. You're going to have more opportunities to move your body in a big field, and the same with fish, right? When fish are raised their whole lives in these bins or in these nets in the ocean, they don't have as much time or opportunity to swim around and get exercise, basically. And so they develop a lot more fat on their meat. And that's what you're seeing with the white marbling on these farmed salmon. Also, the wild caught salmon tends to be higher in nutrients. So basically, I've given you a little quick list over here. Farmed fish, they're up to 20 times higher in toxic chemicals because they are toxic chemicals stay in fat in meat. Then that includes in our own bodies. If we have a lot of fat in our bodies, we're going to have a lot of toxic chemicals in them. Same with fish. If there's more fat in the fish, it's going to have more of the toxic chemicals that stays in the meat, and therefore that you're going to be eating. If you look at the middle picture here at aqua farming, where the arrow is pointing, this water is very dirty. So sometimes in these farms, in these fish farms, the fish are kept in dirty water, or the water is not as fresh as it would be as if they were swimming through an icy cold running water stream in Alaska. So sometimes they ingest more toxins that gets into their meat, and then if you eat that, that gets into you. So that's something to keep in mind. Um, Often for farmed fish, because they are this lighter color, industrial, big food industrial operations will add color to it to make it look a little bit more like wild caught salmon. So add kind of this salmony color, this orangey pinky color. And so sometimes there's artificial colors in it. Like I said, sometimes they're in cramped and dirty conditions. In these bins and in these fisheries, most of the time, farmed fish they eat processed foods. They don't eat their natural diet. They eat little fish pellet foods. Just like if you had a goldfish in your house, you would feed it little pellets or little flakes of food. The same thing happens with farmed fish, is they eat a processed diet, a diet of processed food their whole lives. They don't eat their natural diet. So as you can imagine, their meat is going to be a product of that as well. So also, if you remember back to our other lesson about grass-fed cows versus grain-fed cows, we talked about omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, right? So we learned that omega-3s are really good for you. You want lots of those. And omega-6s, while they're not bad for you, you only want a little bit amount of those because they're very inflammatory. If you have too many omega-6s in your body, you're going to have a lot of inflammation in your body, and inflammation causes disease in the body. We get into that in Pillar 2 and Be the Boss of Your Own Body, and we'll see you there, hopefully. But we learn about how a lot of omega-6 fatty acids will cause inflammation in your body and cause disease in your body. And farmed fish tends to be filled with omega-6 fatty acids. And in a lot of cases, too many to be healthy. So that's something to keep in mind with farmed fish. It's usually cheaper than wild caught fish because it's easier to raise them. They're right there. You don't have to fish for them, basically. They're just right there. So once they're big enough to sell, they are just packaged and sold. And there's no effort put into catching them like there is with wild caught salmon. And so therefore it's cheaper. Makes sense, right? For wild salmon and wild fish, it's usually leaner. Like we talked about, they have more space to run around in and swim around in. And so they're leaner, just like us. They have a lot less fat and a lot less toxins, therefore a lot less toxins. Remember that toxins and heavy metals are kept in the fat of meat. And so if there's less fat, there's less toxins. They're this natural red orange color. That's their natural color of salmon. If you went up to Alaska and took a salmon right out of the river, cut it open, you would see that it's this bright dark red, orange color, very beautiful. Less calories because there's less fat. Eats a need a natural diet. So they eat the diet of their habitat. They eat various things in the water, insects, algae, these kinds of things, and that's the natural diet for a salmon, for any kind of fish. They aren't fed man-made processed food, which the whole thing and Sizzle Kids is that that's a little bit healthier than eating a processed diet. We want to start thinking about food in the way that it was meant, the way that God meant for it to work in our bodies. And God really gave us everything we need in the world, food wise, to be healthy and to thrive. And we really want to get back to that. And I want you to have all this information so that you can look at the whole spectrum of what's available to you to eat and you can decide. So we want to be eating foods and we want to be eating fish that eat their natural diet too, because then that's more natural for us. Um, Wild caught are different with the omegas as well, with the omega vitamins or the omega fatty acids. While farmed fish are really high in omega 6s, wild caught fish are really high in omega 3s. So remember, omega 3s are the good ones. We want lots of those. And omega 6s are the not so good ones, and we want less of those. So, those are the differences between farmed and wild caught fish. Like I said, wild caught are going to be more expensive than farmed fish. We talked about why, and that makes good sense. Uh, and whether you're going to be buying farmed fish and wild caught, I've done both based on how much I want to spend on that day or how much I have to spend on fish. But this is just knowledge that you should know when you're making food choices. And I just want you to start thinking about whenever you're looking at buying meat, think back to where it came from, how it was raised, how close to nature was it raised? Because we know that the closer it was to nature, the healthier it's going to be for you. So, there we have it for fish. In the next lesson, we're going to talk a little bit about meat, about beef, and then we're going to wrap up our series here on industrial farming and ranching and fishing. So I'll see you there.